zombies, walkers, the infected, geeks, creepers.
Oh man.
Throughout the years, we've seen so many iterations of the undead. Like, they've been super relevant in pop culture for decades now, going from the slow-moving Romero zombies all the way to the terrifying clickers featured in The Last of Us. And given how much everyone loved that show, I think it's pretty safe to say that zombies aren't going anywhere anytime soon. Unlike Pedro Pascal in Season 2. Although with that being said, there was definitely a peak in the zombie craze between 2010 and 2016, which can likely be linked to the rise of The Walking Dead. Based on the comic of the same name and airing on Halloween night 2010, The Walking Dead quickly became a must-watch TV show for any zombie fan. Season 1 alone demonstrated how powerful the show could be, having such a strong focus on its central characters.
Ricky Dicky, Dog Rhymes.
Like, come on, that scene where Rick reunites with Laurie and Carl for the first time is just so unbelievably good, man. You get the happiness, the sadness, the oh shit, I've been sleeping with your best friend. It really has everything. Then Season 2 happened. We ignore Season 2. I mean, did we really need to spend 13 episodes stuck on a farm? Absolutely not. So my best advice is to just watch a supercut of every Shane scene and you should be good.
Come on, girl, you got walkers all around you. They're in the woods.
Fortunately, Season 3 onwards was when the show really kicked itself back into high gear, with a real emphasis on the idea that anyone could die at any time. Like, remember Rick's wife Laurie? Yeah, well, she dies during childbirth in episode 4, spawning this fucking meme.
Oh no.
The Walking Dead kept on going from strength to strength. Sure, it had its problems, but evidently that didn't matter because the show continued to get rave reviews, the fan base continued to grow, and the ratings continued to skyrocket, peaking in late 2016 as fans were forced to wait 6 months to find out who exactly was murdered by Batman's dad.
I'm very dyslexic.
Spoilers, he kills the guy from... Unsurprisingly, this season premiere pulled in a monumental 17 million live viewers, a number they would never come close to reaching ever again, as around Season 7 was when the quality of the show really started to decline due to a whole bunch of poor decisions. It's that came back.
You've been pranked, that's why you dying.
Although in fairness, the later seasons definitely had their charm.
Still alive? I'm a goddamn cat.
Honestly though, I think the show should have ended after like Season 8, but it just kept on going for 3 more seasons with viewership consistently dropping after every episode, to the point where the final episode of the show only aired to around 2 million people. For context, the debut episode aired to 5.3 million. But while the Walking Dead TV show died a very slow death, the same cannot be said for the video games based on it. Now, much like TV shows and movies, it felt like every video game that came out during the 2000s and early 2010s had some form of zombie in it.
Sounds like someone breaking in!
On paper, zombies and video games seemed like a perfect match, so obviously it made sense for The Walking Dead to dive into the video game world and cash in on the show's growing popularity, with the very first game releasing in early 2012, Telltale's The Walking Dead. But first, this video is sponsored by Aura. Have you seen this man? He's a data broker still at large and will not hesitate to sell all your personal information to anyone who wants it, revealing your full name, email, home address, health records, and even who your relatives are. What can I do to stop him? I don't want my name to get stolen. Well, that's why I use Aura, the sponsor of today's video. It shows me exactly which data brokers are selling off my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. This not only reduces the amount of spam I get, but also protects me against those filthy hackers, who, if they get their hands on my information, could use it to hack into my bank accounts, or worse, my Twitter account. Seriously though, staying safe online is super important. I mean, only this month, AT&T revealed 73 million customer records, both existing and former, were released on the dark web. To combat this, they recommended those affected use strong passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit card freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. But guess what? Aura does all that for me and means I don't have to worry about any of my information being available on the dark web. If you value your online privacy and want to protect yourself from this man, just use the link in the description or go to aura.com/alexwebb to start your 2-week free trial right now. Being set in the same universe as the comics, Telltale's Walking Dead follows the story of Lee Everett, a convicted criminal on his way to prison at the beginning of the outbreak.
Bang, see you later, you go in prison. You go in prison.
Very quickly, Lee is thrown into this apocalyptic world, meeting a young girl called Clementine who is looking for her parents. And from here on out, the game centers around Lee and Clementine's relationship, with you becoming her sort of protector. Now at the time, Telltale wasn't exactly the most well-known studio, having worked on more than a few games, but ultimately nothing that would receive as much attention as their Walking Dead game. I mean, their first ever title was a poker game called Texas Hold'em. I don't think anyone expected them to go on to make one of the most profoundly emotional and gripping video games of the 2010s.
Stop fucking crying, bitch! Where?
Telltale's Walking Dead was a point-and-click adventure that would focus on what made the show and the comics so compelling, that being the relationships between each character and how they evolve over the course of this episodic game. See, as you can probably tell, the gameplay here wasn't exactly Telltale's strong point, consisting mostly of quick-time events and stressing over which dialogue option to say. Instead, where Telltale really shined was creating a story and characters you could easily get invested in, which is only made more immersive from the fact that your choices have an actual impact on certain relationships and the overall game. Well, kinda, but we'll get back to this screen later. Anyway, safe to say Telltale knocked out the park with Season 1. Like, the first episode alone sold 1 million copies in just 20 days, becoming Telltale's best-selling game to date. The story especially was a high point, as players were forced to make incredibly difficult decisions with usually no clear indication as to which choice would lead to a better outcome.
It's just a little problematic in terms of eating. It's very, very messy.
Like, you know how in some games they'll give you a choice at the end, which usually translates to pick bad ending or pick good ending? Well, here, nothing is anywhere near that simple, as the game presents you with choices that will question your morals and how far you're willing to go just to survive another day. I mean, sure, you can steal all this food, which will clearly help your group, but you have no idea who this food actually belongs to, meaning you could unknowingly be the cause of someone's death. Oh, wait a sec, they've got a Nintendo Switch. I'm sure they won't miss it. The real beauty here is that there's no clear-cut good options, and sometimes regardless of what you pick and how well-intentioned, these choices will often lead to, not so ideal consequences. But on the bright side, the game can be pretty funny too.
You know how to pick a lock, right?
No. Why would you say that?
Well, you're, urban?
That's gotta be racist. There's no way.
Arguably though, the real heart of Telltale's Walking Dead was of course the relationship you build with Clementine as you teach her how to survive in this zombie-infested world.
Get the fuck out of my room! I'm playing Minecraft!
The bond you build with Clementine is the one spot of hope in this otherwise morbidly depressing story filled with death and violence. It is incredibly wholesome seeing Lee fall into this father-like role for Clem, and if you're anything like me, you're going to base a lot of your decisions on what's best for her, as even your smallest of choices will have an impact on how she acts.
It smells like...
Shit. I'm sorry. I shouldn't talk like that.
That was a swear. It smells funny in here. Like shit, right, Lee?
Shut the fuck up!
So of course, by the time you reach the final 5 minutes of that last episode, after protecting Clementine like it was your godforsaken mission in life, Telltale stabs you right in the heart, with an ending that can cause even the most masculine of men to shed a tear. I mean, just look at what it did to my boy PewDiePie. Although, considering they had the actual creator of The Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman, overseeing development, it isn't really that surprising how heartbreaking this game can be. Like, have you read the comics? Holy shit, man. Kirkman specifically said he had played one of Telltale's previous games, Strong Bad's Cool Game for Attractive People. What a fucking title, and this caused him to realise that Telltale was way more focused on telling a good story. So naturally, when Telltale approached Kirkman and Skybound Entertainment with their proposal for a Walking Dead game that would focus more on the player making hard decisions rather than shooting an endless amount of zombies, Kirkman jumped at the chance, becoming heavily involved with the game's development and providing oversight on how the game would connect with the Walking Dead universe.
I do not know what the word Riz means.
Anyway, after around 1 year of development, co-lead developer Jake Rodkin presented Kirkman with a near final build of the game, and after laying his eyes upon it, Kirkman apparently turned to the entire Telltale team and said, "Holy shit guys, you did it." And that they did, with each episode releasing to huge critical acclaim and millions of sales. Season 1 of Telltale's Walking Dead was undeniably a massive success, going on to earn Telltale the 2012 Game of the Year award. And like 60 other awards on top of that. Now after the final episode released in November 2012, it was pretty apparent a second season was coming soon. I mean, the first one made Telltale like $40 million by January 2013, so clearly the decision was obvious. But surprisingly, the next Walking Dead game to come out wasn't even by Telltale. Instead, in March 2013, we would get a completely different game, The Walking Dead: Survival Instinct. Developed by Terminal Reality, a company who had previously worked on the Kinect Star Wars game, Survival Instinct was a first-person shooter and in further contrast to the Telltale game, was canon to the Walking Dead TV show instead of the comic. Basically, the game acts as a sort of prequel story for the Dixon brothers, where you play as everyone's favourite emo redneck, Daryl Dixon.
You better be ready for an attack from the smooch monster tonight.
A character who never existed in the comics, but was exclusively made for the TV show, and he very quickly developed a massive fan base within the first few seasons. A fan base Mr. Dixon has somehow managed to maintain 11 seasons and one spin-off show later. The sheer longevity in Daryl's popularity is worth studying all on its own, but I still have no clue how it grew so rapidly in the first place, considering he wasn't exactly great in season 2.
Listen to me, Olive Oil. I was out there looking for that little girl every single day.
Anyway, in terms of the actual game, it starts with you playing as Daryl's dad. Don't worry, it doesn't last long.
I started blasting.
Daryl and this man, who's apparently his uncle, rush to try and save Father Dixon, but clearly it's too late. So, in an act of kindness, Daryl attempts to mercy kill his dad, but can't bring himself to do it, and ultimately it comes down to his uncle.
We know you're the sus imposter, and I saw you vent in electrical.
Daryl obviously isn't too happy about this, but before he can even plan the funeral, your house is overrun and you're heading out to stock up on supplies, which pretty much becomes the core gameplay loop as you travel to different towns and meet other survivors. Now, with this being canon to the TV show, you'd think Survival Instinct would focus on what made the show so great, that being creating morally complex characters we can get invested in and not want to see turn into a light snack. I mean, Telltale's a shining example of this because he literally just did that, and look at how successful Season 1 was. It was obvious what Terminal Reality needed to do to make this game good, so naturally, they did the exact opposite. Throughout the game, you meet different survivors that have about as much personality as a stale piece of toast. Oh, you thought the walkers were the only mindless fucks in this game? Well then just look at this.
No, don't shoot me!
I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure I can't shoot you with a pipe. Basically, the survivors here will ask you to get them something like food or weapons, and in exchange they'll join your crew, where you can send them out to gather more supplies, but be careful because there's a chance they might die. The only other actual character in this game is your brother and local racist man, Merle Dixon, who we meet on top of a roof with a severely bad sunburn.
Look at the top of his head. Bright red.
Besides that though, there is very little story to this game. You just drive to different towns and kill dozens of zombies while Daryl enjoys a refreshing beverage.
Oh man, I needed that.
Somehow this has become a recurring theme for him. Unfortunately, it seems like living off a diet solely of sports drinks has ruined Daryl's cardio, as the second you break out into a brisk jog, your screen starts to sweat, Daryl will need his inhaler, and then suddenly, hey, would you like to talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? Seriously though, walkers will just spawn in behind you when you're not looking in order to grab those succulent hillbilly cheeks, and once they grab you, it's pretty much game over, because while you fumble around with this dumb minigame, about 17 more walkers have teleported to your location, which as you can tell, isn't fun.
And I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna share with you guys my experiences of not taking a shower for an entire month.
Other than that, the controls are unresponsive, they've clearly recycled locations, there's some insane pop-in, the game looks atrocious, and you can tell Norman Reedus did not give a shit while voice acting here.
Who are you?
I'm looking for meds. Antibiotics, mostly. You got any you can spare?
Sure, shoot that bitch.
What in the hell?
Critically, Survival Instinct was completely nuked with awful review scores, firmly sitting at a 32% on Metacritic with legitimately no positive reviews. Like the best one there was a 50, still calling the game a disappointment. Most critics labelled the game as a lazy cheap cash grab like the majority of tie-in games around the time, with Alex Navarro from Giant Bomb stating that Survival Instinct was an abysmally rushed game of barely connected ideas that brings the player a little more than frustration. And honestly, that's pretty fair. Robert Kirkman was also asked about his involvement with this game during a Reddit AMA and proceeded to throw AMC under the bus, saying, "I'm pretty sure there's an AMC logo before the title of that game and not a picture of my face." Fortunately for Walking Dead fans, Survival Instinct was quickly swept under the rug as later that year Telltale finally released The Walking Dead Season 2. Coming off the huge success of Season 1, Telltale quickly followed up with the 400 Days DLC, which dropped in July 2013, and other than making everyone forget about how awful Survival Instinct was, it also bridged the gap between the last season and the upcoming Season 2. The DLC itself didn't really add much if I'm being honest, containing 5 stories about different survivors during different days of the outbreak, hence you know the whole 400 days thing. Again, it wasn't a necessary DLC, like you'd be fine if you skipped it, but I still thought it was really enjoyable, giving players a little taster of Season 2 while maintaining that good old Telltale charm.
How old was she? 15?
Damn it ain't like that.
Sir, why don't you take a seat?
Then in October, Telltale finally released episode 1 of season 2, and upon purchasing it, you could quickly realise that Telltale had kinda done it again. This season seen you stepping into Clementine's shoes around 16 months after the events of season 1, and with Clementine now being 11 years old, you quickly see how much she's changed from when we first met her, now being more resourceful, more capable, and depending on how you play it, more of a menace.
You should probably think about being nicer to me.
I'm gonna have a panic attack and I'm gonna leave.
Season 2 also introduced a whole bunch of new characters, and while some of them were certainly, interesting,
I need the shit out of that raccoon.
I never felt the same level of investment in them as I did with the season 1 characters. Like, sure, Luke's a cool guy, I guess, but he just doesn't have the same appeal that Kenny's glorious handlebar mustache had. This especially isn't helped by the fact that they brought back the mulleted madman Kenny himself, so of course throughout the game I would side more of him rather than the people I've literally just met. Critically, Season 2 still received pretty positive reviews, although nothing quite like the reception Season 1 got, with Episode 4 in particular getting a fairly mixed reaction, as many said it felt like a filler episode. Oh, what's that? Filler in The Walking Dead? That's simply unheard of. This also wasn't helped by the fact that the writers responsible for the immaculate storytelling in Season 1 fucking quit the company, resulting in the game going through multiple rewrites and having a ton of cut content. But despite all of this, Season 2 still somehow managed to deliver more of what people love from the series, that being interesting character dynamics and choices that would stress you the fuck out, like whether or not you're going to steal all these medical supplies from this poor Russian man.
Check Google, make sure you're not going to order a flamethrower when you can't have one.
Sure, Season 2 definitely had its issues, like the pacing was all over the place and there's a lot of strange writing decisions.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
But I still found myself really enjoying this game, whether that be through seeing how Clementine has grown as a character, or because of Kenny's mullet. Actually, to be fair, this man becomes such a broken, unstable mess by the end of the season that I'm surprised I haven't seen a Sigma Male edit of him yet.
Oh, you don't even smile.
Seriously though, Kenny is a fascinating character because while he clearly still cares about Clementine and is willing to do anything to protect her, he also goes through so much repeated trauma that it really makes you question if staying with him is a good idea. Which makes the ending decision all the more difficult as you're forced to pick between killing Jane, basically the female version of Bear Grylls, or killing Kenny, someone you've known since the start of all of this, but someone who also badly needs therapy. So naturally, given the circumstances, I kept Kenny alive.
No speaking of English!
A true American hero. Season 2 also offered multiple endings depending on who you chose to stay with, which felt like a defensive way to not only end Clementine's story, but this fantastic series as a whole. Then Season 3 happens. See, if Season 2 was where the cracks started to form for Telltale, then Season 3 was when the whole thing fucking collapsed. The Walking Dead: A New Frontier came out close to 3 years after the last season, and by this point in time, Telltale had been pumping out a new game every other month, none of which being able to recapture the critical, and more importantly, financial success of their very first Walking Dead game. So clearly noticing the downward trend, Telltale decided it was time to pull out the big guns, dropping the third season of The Walking Dead in the hopes it would fix the company's bank account. Unfortunately, despite Telltale's best efforts, A New Frontier failed to reach anywhere close to their target, received pretty mixed reviews, and was also hated by the fans. See, instead of doing the logical thing and continuing Clementine's story, she was relegated to being a side character, and we were forced to play as former famous baseball star Javi Garcia. Now, don't get me wrong, Javi is a decent protagonist, but players struggle to get invested in him considering we just spent the past 2 seasons with Clementine. So obviously the sudden switch to this completely new character didn't receive the best reaction. But somehow, it got worse.
This is Domino's.
I mean, I don't know what happened at Telltale in between Season 2 and A New Frontier, but somehow the writing dropped in quality massively, as the game was littered with pointless characters that nobody really cared about. And the most unclear dialogue options I've ever seen. Like there's a flashback scene where Javi's having a flirty conversation with his brother's wife Kate. Kate then accidentally breaks the glass and Javi's brother David comes down and starts yelling at her. You then get the option to either let it go or tell David off. And considering it was just an accident, I think telling him off is probably the more reasonable choice to go with.
Time for you to open your eyes.
Kate's gonna leave your ass.
Wait, I didn't fucking say that. A New Frontier was plagued with these super misleading choices which often led to really dumb outcomes. The writing overall just felt super lazy, and considering Telltale wasn't exactly known for its engaging gameplay, this caused a lot of the fanbase to turn on Season 3. Perhaps the worst thing though is that this season completely ruins the multiple endings you could have gotten in Season 2. Like for example, if you decide to stick with Kenny, well too bad, he gets launched out a car window.
You still gotta remember to buckle your safety belt.
Also, what the fuck happened to his face? Now sure, every Telltale game had this problem, but Season 3 really personified it as a much larger issue within Telltale. That being that the choices you make throughout their games don't actually matter and are ultimately inconsequential to the overall story.
Holy shit! Somebody had to do it. I am the chosen one.
Like, you're only really given the illusion of choice because while the story will change depending on what you do, we all inevitably end up with the same ending, making this screen a complete fucking lie. This meant by the time the fourth and final season came out, a lot of people became pretty disinterested with the series, and despite Season 4 promising to bring an end to Clementine's story, it was just way too late for Telltale, and before Episode 2 even released, the company announced they'd be closing down. Honestly, the downfall of Telltale is a whole video within itself, which I'll definitely save for later, but all these gameplay issues combined with dwindling sales figures and more people just opting to watch YouTubers play their games meant by 2018, Telltale was in financial ruin, eventually being forced to close their doors and leaving only a skeleton crew to finish any prior commitments they had. As a result, Skybound Entertainment took over finishing Season 4, and despite the game nearly being completely cancelled, Season 4 brought everything full circle with a beautifully written goodbye to Clementine, a character we had basically seen grow up throughout these games. This season was a massive step up from A New Frontier. The game recaptures a lot of what made that very first season so special, as Clementine now has AJ to care for, and much like when I played as Lee, I would tailor a lot of my decisions as to what's best for him. More importantly though, this final season delivered an emotionally impactful and satisfying ending to Clementine's story. And also Telltale's, a company who rose to fame because of their Walking Dead series, and now unfortunately, ending along with it. At least we have the mobile games though. Now I'll be honest, when I came up with this video, I thought there was only like 5 or 6 Walking Dead games. So you can imagine my surprise when I seen the mountain of mobile games and crossovers ahead of me. Seriously man, who asked for all of these? Like, did we really need a Walking Dead Escapist crossover? Or a fucking Walking Dead Bridge Constructor? I mean, look how well that went for Rick. Honestly though, I was planning on just piling all these games together, saying they were probably alright, and moving on to the next full game in my list. Mainly because I don't want to use all my phone storage on Walking Dead games, and I don't want to play Bridge Constructor. But then, while I was looking around, I noticed something. A name stood out to me. Overkill's The Walking Dead. For anyone who doesn't know, way back in 2014, Swedish development team Overkill, along with their publisher Starbreeze Studios, announced they were going to be working on their very own Walking Dead game, slated to release in like 2017. The game was apparently pitched to Skybound Entertainment as an online co-op first-person shooter similar to Overkill's Payday series, and given how successful those games were, Skybound Entertainment signed on in the hopes that Overkill would create a Walking Dead game with an online lifespan of around 10 years. Anyway, following their initial announcement video, cinematic trailers were quickly released showcasing the game's survivors, and naturally these trailers start to get fans really interested in what this upcoming game would be about. However, behind the scenes, it wasn't looking good. This was mostly due to the game being developed on the Valhalla engine, an engine which many people at Overkill said was completely unworkable due to only being 60% finished. Clearly Overkill struggled with Valhalla, being met with issues upon issues while trying to build this massive game, and because of these continuous problems, the game was delayed to 2018. The engine was then switched to Unreal 4, with the thought process being that this would solve all of Overkill's problems and they would be able to get the game finished on time. However, because the game had been built on, a whole different engine, a lot of what Overkill had previously made couldn't be ported over, meaning they had to effectively start from scratch on an engine that nobody knew how to work, with only a year till launch. So how do you think this went? Honestly, I didn't even know this game got released. Like, I remember watching the trailers, but other than that, I thought it had gotten cancelled due to how little I heard about it. But apparently, Overkill's The Walking Dead released on November 2018, and was unsurprisingly a buggy, unfinished mess that absolutely should not have been published in this state. The game was so awful in fact, that Skybound Entertainment terminated their contract with Starbreeze, resulting in the game being delisted on Steam and the console versions being cancelled, despite the fact that physical copies had already already been shipped out to retailers. Nonetheless, all of it was recalled, and as of now the game is virtually unplayable, with all those physical copies probably buried in a landfill somewhere. As you can probably tell, by now the Walking Dead IP was in shambles. Telltale had self-imploded, Overkill was a complete disaster, and the show was on its 10th season with record low viewership. So thank God for Saints and Sinners. Coming out at the start of 2020, Saints and Sinners did something that no other Walking Dead game had done before: use VR. Now, VR games at the time had really started to pick up in popularity. Sure, some games were just glorified tech demos or tacked on to pre-existing games, but then you had titles like Boneworks or Half-Life Alyx, which finally started to utilise the potential of virtual reality. Saints and Sinners also uses the tech to great effect, placing you in a zombie-infested New Orleans absolutely dripping in atmosphere, with a story centred around a mysterious group known as the Tower fighting a bunch of rebels known as the Reclaimed, while you all search for the Reserve, a hidden military base filled with supplies. From here, the game kinda lets you pick who you're gonna side with, whether that be the Tower, the Reclaimed, or you can do what I did and shoot everyone. Full transparency, I had never played a VR game before this, so I had no clue what to expect. But when I figured out you could light up a cigarette while also using a broken beer bottle to stab zombies, it was instantly a 10 out of 10 for me. Saints and Sinners really makes you feel like a survivor. Like you can craft some lovely weapons, but they will degrade and eventually break over time, meaning you may need to improvise and grab the nearest spoon.
This is a very special spoon.
Although, I can't lie, it is unbelievably satisfying using a heavy weapon, only to have to forcibly pull out someone's concave skull. I think my neighbour just called the police. Plus, if you get tired bashing brains in, you can take a quick break and enjoy a refreshing beverage, which also lowers your health. Much like in real life. Actually, come to think of it, picking up food in a wasteland isn't exactly the most sanitary thing, so if you eat this stale Twinkie, it will hurt your health, meaning you'll need to scavenge for medicine.
Luckily, I wasn't the only cop with a pill problem.
On top of all of that, there's also a ton of guns, from revolvers to machine guns, which of course come in handy when dealing with hordes of walkers or rival factions. However, it's important to remember you have to manually reload these things too. So, if you don't keep track of your ammo, it can make any random encounter a bit more intense, especially because I can't aim for shit. Fortunately though, I always had a backup plan and crafted a few bombs in case of emergencies. Turns out I'm not great with them either. Do you ever get tired of doing this? Shit. Other than the weapons and stale foods, Saints and Sinners offers some pretty immersive environments which can genuinely become absolutely terrifying to venture through, as you have no idea what's behind the next corner or closed door. Now, in fairness, the game definitely has its issues, like doors are a struggle just to open half the time, and because of the way you store your weapons, it's very easy to accidentally drop them. Meaning, I'll come into an encounter thinking I'm fully armed, only to quickly realise I lost my knife 15 minutes ago. The game also kinda soft-locked me out of finishing the story, as one of the NPCs I was talking to kept on repeating the same lines over and over again.
Not alive. Hey, tourist.
Which stopped my quest from updating, and despite anything I did to her,
Hey, tourist. Hey, tourist.
she just kept on saying the same fucking thing.
I have to finish the story.
Regardless of these admittedly slight issues, I still had a blast playing Saints and Sinners, whether that be through its visceral combat or progressing my way through its fun story. And clearly, I wasn't the only one who shared this opinion, because Saints and Sinners received great reviews all round, currently sitting at an 81% on Metacritic, with many saying it's one of the best VR titles out there. I feel like I should also mention, since the release of Saints and Sinners, there has been 2 other Walking Dead related VR titles to come out. Firstly, there is The Walking Dead Onslaught, a VR game based on the AMC show, letting you play as various characters from that series, meaning finally, I am Rick.
God, I hate those frickin' zombies.
Other than that, the game offered very little besides some fun gameplay, and overall got pretty mid reviews. The other game released was a sequel to Saints and Sinners titled Retribution, although it didn't get anywhere near as good reviews due to the game's poor performance issues and also recycling a lot of stuff from the first game. But on the other hand, Chainsaw. Seriously though, just as the Walking Dead IP had fallen to its lowest point, it genuinely did seem that Saints and Sinners was a step in the right direction and the future was looking bright.
So what the fuck happened here?
I legitimately have put off playing this game for as long as possible. Like, it baffles me that in the year of 2023, a game as bad as this somehow gets approved.
Really? This? In my house?
The Walking Dead Destinies is the most recent game to come out under the Walking Dead banner, produced by Game Mill Entertainment, and if you don't know who they are, they're also responsible for the 2023 King Kong game, where they forgot to animate the cutscenes.
monkey.
Game Mill firmly had the Worst Game of the Year award locked down tight, yet they still somehow managed to outdo themselves when they released Destinies. Like from the very first trailer, you could just tell something felt off. I mean, come on, this looks like a fucking PlayStation 2 game. The only thing Destinies had going for it was it had an admittedly decent premise. See, the game takes place within the first 4 seasons of the Walking Dead TV show, going from Rick waking up in the hospital to the governor's assault in the prison. The twist here is that you now have the opportunity to change the story and keep other characters alive who may have died in the actual TV show, essentially taking the most popular what-if scenarios and turning them into a video game. Game Mill clearly knew this was their only selling point too, because the trailers heavily focused on it, showing a version of the story where Shane had actually succeeded in killing Rick and taken his place as the group's leader. Well, I mean, I think this is supposed to be Shane, it's kinda hard to tell to be honest. In theory, this wasn't a bad idea, and if done well, had a lot of potential to actually deliver a pretty fun story with some emotional moments. However, when it comes to Destinies, let's just say it didn't quite stick the landing.
So, the park's full of walkers.
That's it!
I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that Destinies is one of the worst games I played. Like how a game this broken, this buggy, this bad was ever allowed to be sold in the first place at close to £40 is a crime within itself. Visually, Destinies looks like it was made in 2006, with every game model looking like a knockoff version of their on-screen counterparts.
Holy crap! You are creepy as shit.
This also isn't helped by the fact that Game Mill couldn't be bothered animating the cutscenes again, so instead we get this.
No. No. No, no, no. No, no, no!
Nothing about this game worked. The combat was abysmal, being tied to a stamina bar which drains unbelievably quickly, the guns were about as impactful as Nerf blasters, and the stealth was utterly tedious due to how brain dead both the zombies and human AI is. But hey, at least you can hide in a cloud of smoke. I don't think smoke works like that though. Other than that, the game is filled with visual glitches, which isn't exactly surprising, some oddly placed puzzles, and perhaps worst of all, Destinies includes a few boss fights that are completely fucked. I have no clue what's going on here. The only thing Destinies does somewhat well is that the story will change depending on the choices you make. Although it's hard to appreciate that when the game butchers any emotional scenes from the show with beautiful cutscenes like this.
Rick?
You don't understand. You don't stop hitting the gritty.
To the surprise of absolutely no one, Destinies quickly became the lowest rated Walking Dead game ever made, and as I previously said, it is the last game to come out under the Walking Dead banner, meaning the legacy of this franchise may possibly end with this fucking disaster. It's honestly pretty surreal looking at all these games and seeing how drastically the quality has fluctuated, going from arguably the best game of 2012 to what is well regarded as the worst game of 2023. Oddly enough though, I think all these games are kind of indicative of the show, starting off incredibly strongly, having its fair share of highs and lows, but ultimately ending in a bit of a disappointment. However, when I think of The Walking Dead, I don't think about how bad it got. Rather, I'm going to remember how good those first few seasons were, how fun playing through Saints and Sinners was, and the emotional journey Telltale took me on in Season 1. Sure, it's easy to point out how this franchise died, I mean I've just done that for half an hour, but when it comes to The Walking Dead, I'm going to remember when it felt alive.
That little girl's in my care. Anyone who tries to get between me and her, anyone, is gonna wind up dead.
What happened, Rick? I thought you weren't the good guy anymore. Ain't that what you said?
I found him.
I'm still not bitten.
You're Rick, right? I'm Negan.
Besides, I already made you a promise.
Leave.